Welcome back. In the 1st Congressional District Democratic primary, polling shows Stephanie Shaheen is the front runner. And at the moment, there's only one competitor in that big field close to striking distance. That's Maura Sullivan, Iraq War veteran and first vice chair of the state Democratic Party. Ms. Sullivan is our guest this morning on Close Up. Maura, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me back, Adam. And I have to say, as a heads up to your viewers, it was the Marine Corps birthday this week and Veterans Day. I've been talking to so many people around our state. I'm starting to lose my voice. So thanks for bearing with me.
We'll try and make it through here. And so you opposed the deal to reopen the government that was brokered in part by Senators Shaheen and Hassan. You know, why was keeping up the fight more important in this case, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have great respect for our senators' years of service. I believe they negotiated in good faith. Negotiations are tough, as all of us who've led them know. But, you know, I didn't serve in the Marines in Fallujah to back down and watch leaders back down when health care for over 5 million Americans is at stake. This has been a significant cause of my journey of service. You know, when it came to light about 11 years ago, that 40 veterans died in Phoenix, Arizona, due to wait times at the VA. I went and joined the Obama administration to fight for better access to health care. And I'm really proud to have been trusted by President Obama, to have been a part of the team that brought health care to more than 9 million veterans, better access to health care to more than 9 million veterans all around our country. I've been really clear with people. I will never surrender when it comes to health care, just as I never surrendered in the Marines. I will never back down when it comes to protecting health care for granted staters.
You note your military service there. As you know, you can't fight without a strategy. You know, it was no indication that the Senate Republicans were going to come back to the table. And in fact, the Trump administration went to court, right, to keep those SNAP benefits from the people. So it's hard to imagine what could have possibly happened subsequently that would bring them to the table, but you think there would have been something. What is that?
Look, any deal that was to be done needed to include extension of the ACA tax credits. I was in Manchester last night. Congressman Jason Crow, a fellow Iraq War veteran, was here campaigning with me, and a woman came up to me at Two Share Brewery, grabbed my arm, and said, "Please tell me you will never back down from the ACA." I asked her about her premium. She said it was about $949 a month. And she said, "Look, that's not cheap." She goes, "But I can do that. I can make that work. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm happy to pay my share. But it's going to go up possibly another $1,000 a month. And I just can't make that work." That's what's at stake right now. That's what I'm hearing from across our state. I will never back down protecting health care. We absolutely have to protect it at all costs.
Let's let this play out, though, for you and others who would have voted to continue the government shutdown. You end up with a travel nightmare at Thanksgiving, federal workers not being paid, potentially facing the repo man in the weeks and months ahead, all kinds of compounding societal dysfunction. At some point, the damage to the economy starts to add up to maybe as much or more than what the ACA money would have been mitigated there. You would have been okay letting that continue. Why?
Let's be clear. This was a decision between two really, and I mean really, bad options. You know, I live within eyesight of the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, and I was on our shipyard within the last couple of weeks picking up some groceries for my family, and I talked to a number of people at the commissary there. They had bags that people were paying for to provide them for needy families who were coming in to get some supplemental food for their dinner. I asked what else people needed. You know, the first two things that they said to me, Adam? Diapers and baby formula. As a mother of 3 young children, 4, 3, and 1, that gutted me to hear that. So let's be clear, these were two bad options. Let's also be clear who put us in that mess in the first place, and that is Donald Trump and the Republicans. They were okay giving tax cuts to billionaires. They were okay giving tax cuts to corporations. And why? So that 25,000 kids in New Hampshire would go without SNAP, would go hungry, and 5 million people in this country wouldn't have health care. It's not okay, and they're responsible.
I just want to explore that a little bit, because I think this is an interesting part of the politics in all of this. Is you see this in your own community and the problems that it's causing, and yet you would have voted to continue that.
Adam, these were two really bad options, and we can never back down from health care for the American people. We have to continue that fight while we had the leverage that we did. Any deal that was to be done needed to include the extension of the ACA tax subsidies, period. I have a record of fighting for health care at the highest levels of our federal government as Assistant Secretary of the VA. I'm going to take that same fight that I brought to the Marines, that I brought to my work with President Obama, to bear on behalf of fighting for health care for the people in New Hampshire.
Let's turn to the politics of this primary race. In your your primary. You're up against a formidable opponent on her own rights in Stephanie Shaheen. She also happens to have the most famous name in Democratic politics on her side as well. Quite a political dilemma for you to navigate. Are we ever going to see you go directly at her one-on-one and challenge Stephanie Shaheen head-to-head?
Well, Adam, this race is not about last names. This race is about leadership. And I, have a proven record of fighting on some of the toughest fights. I served in the Marines during the Iraq War. I stepped up to serve 11 years ago when it came to light that 40 veterans died in Phoenix, Arizona, due to long wait times at the VA. I was outraged, like so many of us, and I went and I joined the Obama administration. And I was really proud to be part of President Obama's team at the VA that worked on and implemented the bipartisan legislation of the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act. Now, people come into politics in different ways. My path was through hard work and through service. And I think people are looking for serious leaders right now. People are looking for who's going to fight for them, who's going to lower their costs, and who has what it takes to lead on day one. And I'm ready to fight for the people in New Hampshire.
Do you agree with your fellow 1st District candidate, Christian Urrutia, that Stephanie needs to disavow her mother's support now based on the shutdown deal?
I'm not going to tell anyone else how to run their campaign. I mean, let's be clear, I think Thanksgiving should be pretty interesting. But what I will talk about is, again, my record of fighting for health care. I'm really proud to have been trusted by President Obama to lead at the VA, to lead at the Pentagon, to work on issues that support military families, to work on matters of national security. I have a proven record of service. I've been committed to service for most of my adult life. I come from a family committed to service. And that is the commitment I'm going to bring to this race and to the people of New Hampshire as their representative from this district.
Let's turn to one of the big discussion points in Washington right now. More information is coming out regarding convicted sex offender and disgraced former financier Jeffrey Epstein, who took his own life a few years back. Several of his emails were released this last week. This is a realm in which there's a lot of speculation. Emails are adding fuel to that fire, but it's also a major topic of discussion in Congress, so there's a public policy aspect here. Few definitive facts. We don't know how this is going to end, but do you believe this issue matters, or is this just a sideshow?
Of course it matters, Adam. Of course it matters. And if I were in Congress, I would be absolutely voting to release the Epstein files. Let's be clear about the fact it is ridiculous that it took Speaker Johnson 41 days to swear in a duly elected member of Congress because he was trying to prevent a vote on the Epstein files. The files need to be released. We need to follow the facts. And I'll tell you, as a mother of 3 young children under 4, including a 3-year-old daughter, I'm outraged and just so disappointed that we may have leaders in our government that are engaging in this type of behavior. We need to be electing leaders who have, people of character, of integrity, who are role models. Those, like the leaders that were elected in Virginia and New Jersey last week, in Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, servant leaders, national security moms, people of character who have proven results and are going to lead our country forward. Those are the type of leaders I want to see in our country.
Do you think it'll change anyone's opinion, though, no matter what comes out? Because obviously things, and President Trump has faced a lot of scandals in the past. It really hasn't changed his support.
Oh, I think it will. Yes, I do think it will. I have a lot of faith in the American people. If the President of the United States is, ensnared in this type of behavior, that's first of all, it's a sad day for America. It's a horrible day for America. But we need to hold him accountable, and he probably shouldn't be president anymore.
And that is a big we'll see here in terms of what is actually in the files and what will be released. But you campaigned on the ground recently for a Democratic candidate for mayor in Manchester. She didn't win. She was a big proponent of repealing Manchester's camping ordinance, which likely would have brought back those large homeless encampments in the Queen City. First, are you in alignment with her on that policy? Do you think that a camping ordinance in Manchester should be repealed?
I think we have a lot of issues with homelessness, not only in Manchester, but in other places throughout our district. I recently was up in North Conway, visited the Gibson Senior Center there, did a small business tour there, and learned a lot about the homeless problem that they are experiencing. They have homeless people who are sleeping in the woods because of our minimum wage, our low minimum wage in New Hampshire, and the ability to maintain a workforce, which they struggle with housing costs up there. We need to do more as a federal government to provide more housing here in New Hampshire all throughout our district, and that's something I'm going to be focused on.
But do you think there should be large encampments should be able to come back back in Manchester? Is that a...
I'm focused on making sure that we get the federal resources to partner with our local leaders. I look forward to working with the mayor of Manchester, with the Board of Aldermen that were just elected, with the newly elected all-Democratic school board to do what's in the best interest of the community.
More broadly, though, this is potentially one of these issues that, you know, Democrats have races that they could win and that they've lost. Does there need to be a recalibration on issues like this where voters have not agreed necessarily with the way Democrats have handled issues like urban homelessness?
I think the results speak for themselves in Manchester last week. Democrats swept the school board. Democrats had resounding results for the elections for aldermen at large. I was there. I've been knocking doors in Manchester a lot over the last 6 weeks. I was there till about 10:30 on election night. Probably one of the reasons my voice is still gone. I think we're really, really proud of the path ahead and really, really excited for the children of Manchester who are going to benefit from having the school board that they deserve.
All right. Yeah, I don't think they were campaigning on repealing the camping ordinance, though. But thank you so much for joining us. More. The Voice made it. We're glad that you did as well. So we'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll be right back with Governor Kelly Ayotte's plea to Washington coming out of the government shutdown. Stay with us.